What's happening, everybody? This is Bobby Borg, aka Professor, and you're listening to your Morning Coffee, the podcast, with your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart, weekly music news for the new music business.
From Luminate, the Luminate U.S. year-end music report for 2022.
From Music Business Worldwide, Sir Lucian Grainge, music needs a new streaming payout model, and we're working on it.
And from Symphonic, the ultimate guide for a kick-ass year 2023. Not just a year 2023, it's a kick-ass year. Damn it. Heck yeah, it is. All right, Jay, we're going to talk about all kinds of ultimate and kick-ass things. You are listening to the Your Morning Coffee podcast. We are happy you're here, and we are going to get the boogie going right about now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air. On the air. On the air. On the air. On the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Oh, good day to you, Sir Jay. How are you on this fine rainy day in Southern California?
Yeah, another storm. We need the water, but it's a little crazy.
Yes, it is, but it's lovely to wake up when it's raining. It's been so long since that's been happening here in SoCal, so really
People
excited.
don't know how to drive in the rain in Los Angeles. I was born in the Seattle area, and I can tell you people know how to drive in the rain in Seattle.
Right.
But in Los Angeles, it doesn't rain that much, and when it does, the kind of oil and stuff rises up and makes it even more slick, and people are, they're putting on their makeup, they're texting while they're driving, they're going too fast. It's a scary place to be. Just saying.
Absolutely. My first job out of college was working for Enterprise Rent-A-Car in LA. And the place I worked, we had like 600 cars on the lot. And literally the next day after a rain, because there were so many accidents, no cars, just zero cars. And
That's
it is crazy. I mean, you see how many accidents happen with the rain. And that is the reality of Southern California. But
be careful out there, people.
Absolutely. I'm doing the happy rain dance. And man, so many things to talk about. You and I were talking, we've both been talking about, and I still haven't finished the book, actually, the Bono book. But it turns out they're going to be releasing some of the different versions of the 40 songs that he mentions in the book. Very exciting.
Yeah, we talked about this. The book, if you haven't heard us talk about it, is by Bono. It's a biography. It's called Surrender: 40 Songs, One Story. And I have the physical book right here, but I also have the audio book, which is really different because, number one, it's Bono reading you his book, which is pretty cool. He's very clever and poetic and funny. But each chapter starts with a snippet of an acoustic version of a U2 song. And they're beautiful. And we talked about this on the podcast. And this last week, they announced that will be the new album by U2. And I can't wait because it sounded so amazing, but really looking forward to that.
Yeah, and when you read the book, boy, he is so erudite, so well-read and well-informed and a really good writer. And he's a great raconteur of just talking about his stories, and he's very sort of self-effacing. And, he did a lot of press for that book. And it's, I've watched a lot of his interviews on YouTube on the various outlets that had him on. And he's just he's just so, like I said, self-effacing and seemingly so down to earth. And it's just really interesting to hear the backstories of the early days of that band. And of course, he talks a lot about the importance of their now ex-manager, because he retired, Paul McGuinness, and how important his perspective was in those early days.
Absolutely.
And really, really just, we both love that inside baseball stuff, the business side of things, but also the creative aspect. And there's a little bit of everything in the book. It's really interesting.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah.
And just really quickly, before we dive in, a couple of things. One, I was listening to Variety's Strictly Business podcast, and that's one of your favorites, one of my favorites. Shirley Halperin is absolutely amazing with that podcast. I never miss any episode that she's on. She interviewed Carrie Ann Marshall from Warner Chappell on this last one. I think it dropped January 11th. But if you want to kind of, see how the sausage is made on the publishing side, I highly recommend it's Variety's Strictly Business podcast. This last one with Carrie Ann Marshall from Warner Chappell. It's just absolutely fantastic.
Well, and you and I have talked so many times on the podcast, but it's worth mentioning again in that, in our era, and maybe it's similar now, I don't know, but, there was just two universes. There was the recorded music universe, and then there was the music publishing universe. And it was very rare that those worlds crossed over. They did it at a super, super high level, but, I knew people at lots of different labels and, all kinds of stuff, but I really rarely knew people over in publishing. So it's always been, for me, since most of my career is on the recorded music side, it's always just been a bit of a mystery what the hell they do over there. It's like, how does that world work? And it's just very different. And of course, we talk a lot about it, and it's so important. I mean, it's always been important, but it's a very different business model. It's a very different business and a lot of different sort of ways that they operate. But it's fascinating to hear about that world over there. And
it is.
Yeah.
Here's the thing I learned from listening to Carrie Ann and Shirley is that it's not static. It's dynamic. It's evolving. It's changing, just like the rest of the music industry.
Right.
Anyway, highly recommend that. Next week, you and I are going to dive into a new book, a new edition, the third edition of Ari Herstand's book, How to Make It in the New Music Business. I had a really interesting conversation with Ari this week. We recorded a portion of that, which we'll play on the podcast next week. Because the book comes out on the 17th, and as we're recording this, it's actually the 14th, so I haven't received the book yet, and I want to read through some of it before we talk about it. But stay tuned next week for a conversation with Ari Herstand. His book, How to Make It in the New Music Business. This is the third edition. It's one of those books that you and I talk about, like the Donald Passman book or Mike Warner's book or Will Page's book, that everyone should have on their desk in the music industry.
It's Jay and Mike's top 5, really.
Yeah.
And it's like they are such crucial books to have on your nightstand or on your bookshelf, because it's just they fill in the blanks. I don't know how else to say it, and it's really
That's right.
Great books. And those guys, including Ari, spend so much time. And again, when they do another edition, it's not like, it's dramatic changes, because this is a dramatic and dynamic industry. And so you have to get the latest edition, period, because
absolutely
so many things have changed. So
and what I love about it is Ari is an artist. He's a singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
I kind of like his, more chill stuff. It's just really good singer-songwriter stuff. And the reason I bring that up, and Mike Warner, he's a DJ and he's in a band. They've done it. They've done tours. They've done interviews with the press. They've worked sync licensing. They've made merch. They've done all these things and learned by experience. Here's some things that you should do. Here's some things maybe you should avoid. It's kind of a best practices kind of thing.
Yes.
So any of these people like Ari, like Mike, or even Bono, these are people who have done it. They're not, just giving you information that they've read somewhere. It's more by experience.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very much looking forward to that book because, like we said, it's the big five. I mean, it's
right.
one of the big five, the ones that you absolutely have to own. So
Yeah,
there
so
you
we'll
do.
dig in next week.
Check
Yeah.
that out, exactly. By the way, Jay, when we do this podcast every week, we stand on the shoulders of giants, as we like to say.
We certainly do.
We love the folks that help us bring it to the party, our wonderful sponsors, including our good friends over at Bandzoogle. We want to take this time to congratulate Bandzoogle members for surpassing $100 million in commission-free sales of music, merch, and tickets through their website. That's right, $100 million.
That's incredible.
It's unbelievable. Bandzoogle makes it easy to build a stunning website and online store for your music in just minutes. All the features you need are already built in, including dozens of fully customizable templates, tools to sell your music, merch, and tickets commission-free, mailing list tools to grow your fan list and send newsletters, integrations with Bandcamp, SoundCloud, YouTube, Bands in Town, and more, so you can easily add content from your other online profiles, live support from their musician-friendly team 7 days a week. Plans start at just $8.29 a month, which includes hosting and your own free custom domain name. Your Morning Coffee podcast listeners can jump over to bandzoogle.com to try it free for 30 days and use the promo code MORNINGCOFFEE, all one word, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code MORNINGCOFFEE.
Very cool. We're also brought to you by Hypebot. Since 2004, Hypebot has chronicled the new music industry and the trends and technologies that are changing how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and monetized. Edited daily by founder Bruce Houghton, with help from Alana Bonilla, Hypebot and sister blog Music Think Tank are published by live discovery and marketing platform Bands in Town. And I do want to add that on one of my other podcasts, Music Biz Weekly, this last week we interviewed Bruce Houghton about touring, about merch, about all sorts of things. So check out the Music Biz Weekly podcast, our new one, which is dropping any day now.
Indeed. How about Bands in Town? Over 74 million live music fans trust Bands in Town to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It is the #1 artist service platform connecting over 560,000 artists with their superfans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists access their own dashboard to manage and promote their tour dates across all platforms.
Yeah, and a special thank you to Music Business Association. They put on that Music Biz conference, and that's the point of origin for inspiration, collaboration all across the music business. Join us in Nashville, May 15th through the 18th, and we'll see you there.
Yes, indeed. So we certainly appreciate the Music Business Association, Bandzoogle, Hypebot, and Bands in Town for helping us put the whole dang thing together. And my co-host every week, going back 126 episodes, is none other than Jay Gilbert. He is a music industry consultant, curator of the weekly Your Morning Coffee newsletter, and a former executive with a couple of small companies you might have heard of, including Universal Music Group, Sony Music Group, Warner Music Group, and Fox Home Entertainment.
And thank you. This gentleman sitting across from me is Mike Etchart, longtime host of Sound and Vision Radio, formerly of SST Records, Warner Music, Capital EMI, and Universal Music Groups.
All true. And let's jump in because we've got so many interesting things to talk about, Jay. It's a fun one. This first one from Luminate, the Luminate U.S. year-end music report for 2022. And of course, my goodness, so much
That was a lead
information.
story this week in Your Morning Coffee. It's such a great report. Not only the report, and I included a link where you can download it, but there was a story from Music Business Worldwide, and the headline was On-Demand Song Streams Grew 12.2% in the U.S. last year and 25.6% globally. But what I found really interesting was they had a live stream with a couple of executives from Luminate that I caught this last week. It was their VP of Research, Matthew Yagier, and Senior Director of Industry Relations, Jamie Marconet. They did this live stream and they presented the findings and kind of walked through it, because it's nice to see all these charts and graphs and the data, but it's also interesting for smart people to kind of walk through it and go, well, this is what I thought was unusual, an increase here, and there were some surprises. But I'll let you kind of kick off what this Luminate report is.
Yeah, just to kind of make sure everybody remembers. So Luminate is the artist formerly known as MRC Data, which was the artist formerly known as SoundScan before that. So a little bit of confusing name changes there, but so they've been in this space forever. But this, of course, is 2022 versus 2021. The tracking was done over 200 countries, and it powers the Billboard charts. So this is pretty important information, to say the least.
Some people may not be aware that they power those Billboard charts, but this is kind of our point of reference for data. And it covers worldwide streaming, which was up 25.6%. In fact, let's just round some of these numbers. So about 26%. That was, over 5 trillion streams. It was 5 trillion. It was the first time that it was over 5 trillion. U.S. audio streams were up 12%. And that's interesting because since around 2018, year-over-year growth has slowed a bit each year in streaming, but not in 2022. There were actually, more than 20 billion audio streams in 2022 versus 2021.
Amazing. Let's talk vinyl a little bit. U.S. vinyl was up 4.2%. The biggest drivers, of course, were kind of the holiday shopping season. I said shipping season. The holiday shopping season, 25 to 30% of the year. The percentages goes during the holiday shopping season. Record store day drops, of course. Taylor Swift Midnights was released back in October, and to say that Taylor Swift kind of moves things with her releases is an understatement, because boy,
absolutely
that has an enormous effect.
Absolutely. And you talk about vinyl being up around 4%. What could that have been? You and I, we talk about this a lot, but it's getting better. But there have been so many capacity issues and other issues with vinyl production. And I know there's some, new production facilities going online. One's in Nashville, for example. But what could that number have been if we didn't have those issues? So that's on the vinyl side, still up over 4%. Catalog versus current. There is a little bit of confusion with this, but let's talk about it. So catalog was up about 13%. Catalog share of the business went from about 70% to over 72%. So that equals about, a little over 700 million units, equivalents. So what's driving that number? And what you find out is that catalog is 18 months or older. That's the designation for catalog, right? And a lot of people, when they think catalog, they think, oh, well, that's Fleetwood Mac, that's the Beatles, that's this. Well, most of it, most of the numbers that make up catalog are between 2017 and, 2020. Those releases within that window, they're driving most of the catalog numbers.
Interesting. Also, we talk about consumption mix. So here's 3 number one albums, and kind of what the mixture of those and those number one albums were. Bad Bunny, almost 96% of that consumption is streaming.
That one really surprised me.
Me too.
I knew it would be high, but 96%.
I know, crazy.
Like, where's no vinyl, no CDs? That was amazing to me.
All streaming, almost all streaming. By the way, and as a side note, I watched a great movie called Bullet Train. It's just fairly out, and Bad Bunny is in it. He's an actor.
As an actor?
Yes, he's really good in it. It's a great movie. Very bizarre, funny movie.
That's great.
So Beyonce, 42.6% streaming.
So about 43% streaming.
Right, exactly. And then what's the other? And then this says actually 36.6%.
Oh no,
streaming.
That was a typo. That's actually CD sales.
Oh, there you go. CD sales. How about that? It's the year 2023, and here's an artist named Beyonce who still has almost 37% of her consumption mix is compact discs. Jay, has she not read the information that CDs are dead?
Well, your point's well taken. Of course, this is 2022 versus 2021, but you're absolutely right. To get 37% CD sales. Well, it also goes to, her audience is a little more adult, little more maybe affluent, and they go into some of these breakdowns later, but I'll let you finishes.
Yeah, crazy though. And then Taylor Swift, and we'll talk about her exact vinyl numbers in a minute. Almost 37% or over 36% of her consumption was vinyl. You were talking one of the biggest artists in the world that had 36, in this case, 0.4% vinyl purchases. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And I will say, I keep saying this, but I will say it again. I never... I couldn't imagine, because I still remember when vinyl went away and how quickly we were running away from it. We couldn't wait to buy CDs. And it's the same thing now. It's just we vinyl is so hot, continues to be hot, and it just blows my mind.
Yeah, and even things like, I noticed in here, we won't go too deep into it, but things like cassettes.
Yes.
They're not a big number. I think it was like 400,000 units or something like that, but it was up over 25% year over year.
And some manufacturing facility is manufacturing 400,000 cassettes. Come on,
I know.
It's unbelievable.
And a lot of that was, Taylor Swift. Her fans like that. So let's look at, these configurations and consumption by genre. I thought this was really interesting. So if you just look at country, they consume their music from radio primarily, more so than, watching short form video, which is number 2 for country, and more so than listening to CDs, which is still pretty high. Hip hop, it's a little bit different. With hip hop, the number one way to consume is short form video. You're 35% more likely to consume your music if you like hip hop and rap from short form video than other formats. Number 2 for hip hop and rap is streaming, and number 3 is music videos. And I'll take the next one, and you can take the next 3. Latin, number 1, not surprisingly, after you hear some of the things about Bad Bunny, number 1 is watching short form video, and then of course number 2 is streaming, and then number 2 is streaming video. I'm sorry, I'm messing this up. Number 2 is streaming video. Number 3 is streaming audio. Woo! There you go.
Yes, and when we look at pop, excuse me, number 1 is watching short music video clips. Number 2 is streaming audio, and number 3 is basically listening to AM/FM radio. Again, when you look at what I found really interesting too is, in the mix of all of these almost is AM/FM radio. Still.
You forget that's still your car. Most cars, if not all cars, have a radio in them, but they don't necessarily have a cassette deck, CD player.
That's right.
Streaming, it's free.
And it's free, exactly. When you look at the category of rock, it's almost completely even across the board between AM/FM radio, between listening to vinyl, which is, no, I'm sorry, that's not vinyl. They have these little icons, so you have to keep going up and down to see, and the icons are somewhat similar. I'm sorry. So it's almost even across the board between AM/FM radio, CDs, and vinyl for rock.
Yeah.
Not really surprising, I suppose. And then when we get down to R&B, the top format is watching short music video clips, interestingly enough. And then we also have number 2 is streaming music videos online, and then down to streaming audio. So it's just interesting stuff.
Yeah. It's interesting to see the different behaviors, from the different genres. And they have a really cool chart in here about consumption in other territories. So they break it down from North America, and these are averages, Middle East and Africa, Europe, Asia Pacific, and Latin America. And they use those same things that we just talked about, like streaming music, streaming videos, listening to radio, buying CDs, vinyl, etc. And just a couple of them that kind of jumped out at me because I thought they were, pretty high. Like Latin America, no surprise after we just talked about Bad Bunny, the number one way to consume music is from streaming. 76% of their music consumption is, the fans, 76% of them stream music. And then 83% of them stream music videos. So I thought it was really interesting looking around at the different territories, like how little on average people listen to vinyl in some of these territories compared to others.
Right. And then I'm kind of like looking at territories I'm not familiar with. So I kind of was gravitating towards the Middle East and Africa. One of the things that jumped out for them is like 80% streaming music videos online, which was kind of surprising. And yeah, so it's just kind of wild to kind of look and see what everybody is doing in those territories. And again, getting back to Middle East and Africa, in terms of listening to vinyl records, like to put it in perspective, here in North America, the average is 12%. In the Middle East and Africa, it's 17%. That's the highest number for listening to vinyl recorded LPs. It's in the Middle East and Africa, which is fascinating. And I don't know if that's a new thing or if it's just still an extension of what it's always been, vinyl since the beginning. I don't know the answer to that, but it's really interesting to kind of look at these numbers.
And there's certain territories that are just so physical, like Japan, where it's the number one way people consume music. So Luminate, they had this section called Fanalytics, and we won't dive too deeply into it, but you can download this report for free. The link is in your morning coffee lead story. But they broke up fans in 5 different buckets. One is the enthusiast, which I don't fit into any of these perfectly, but I'm closest to that one, and I think you probably are too. The next one is the devotee, the radio rocker, the cool kid, and the ghost listener. And I'm not talking about the band. I'm talking about just the way that they consume music. So that's how they kind of break this down, and they go into all of the different behaviors of each one of those groups. And I'm not going to get into that, but you should check it out. It's really, really interesting. But I was I don't know if you noticed, but I was looking at the top vinyl albums, and I was a little surprised at the top 10.
Me too, absolutely. Well, so let's go down with the top vinyl album sales. As we mentioned, Taylor Swift Midnights, we're talking sales of 945,000 copies. So that's almost 1 million copies. And it's a big dip between number 1 and number 2. Number 2 is Harry Styles' Harry's House, 480,000 units, not insignificant. Then we drop down to Olivia Rodrigo. She's at 263, Kendrick Lamar, 254. So it's kind of a bunch up there between that. Number 5 interests me. So, when we talk about Taylor Swift, Harry Styles, Olivia Rodrigo, Kendrick Lamar, okay, those are contemporary artists. Number 5, Fleetwood Mac Rumors, an album that came out in 1977.
It's a great album.
It's a great album, 243,000 copies. Then we jump down to Tyler, the Creator, at 211. Taylor Swift, again, with another record here, Folklore at 174. Tyler, the Creator, with the second album as well, 172,000. Michael Jackson, Thriller, 169,000. And the Beatles, Abbey Road, at 160,000. But,
right.
Very interesting to see those numbers. But again, we're talking, and again, as we've mentioned and continue to mention, there is still capacity issues. So these numbers are somewhat lower than they could have been had there been a constant supply. We don't know what that number would be, but it certainly would be more than this.
That's right. And as you point out, 7 of the top 10 were newer, contemporary, and only 3 of them are what you and I would consider to be real catalog.
And what's interesting about that, I'm sorry for interrupting, is when we talked about how catalog is rising on the streaming side, yet on the vinyl side, it's pretty amazing when you look at how many contemporary albums are at the top of the vinyl list. Stunning.
Yeah, absolutely. And a stat that we had heard from Will Page, only half of vinyl buyers actually own a record player, and that's
amazing.
And my buddy Cade was asking me about that this week, and I was telling him that it's a little misleading because a lot of vinyl comes with a download card, so you can have the music and still have the vinyl and not have a record player. But a lot of people, they like to put it up on their wall. They like to display it and show how cool they are. Like, I'm cooler than you because I have the vinyl thing. Plus, let's not discount when you're at the merch table and you get something signed, or you go, if you're fortunate enough to have a meet and greet, with some of these artists, that it's cool to have that vinyl signed and up on your wall. I thought it was interesting that vinyl buyers, they're more engaged music fans, and they're more likely to be Gen Z. They're 27% more likely to purchase vinyl than the average music listeners. And, it doesn't it's not that surprising that people who buy vinyl are typically more engaged music fans, and they buy more music than anyone else.
Yes, and as I'm sure, not only are they buying vinyl, they are consuming music in almost every other way. I'm sure they're big ticket buyers for live shows. I'm sure they are big consumers of streaming of everything. And so, I'm quite sure that. The next one is very interesting. Again, share of total volume by format and genre of selected top genres. I'll let you start it, but it's really interesting.
It's interesting to look at the different genres that they break up, and they break up 11 of them, and then they say, like, for example, you look at rock, 16, 17% of that genre is streaming, total on-demand streams, and they break it down by video streams, audio streams, total album sales, and you look at physical. I think it's really interesting to look at physical, CDs and vinyl and cassettes, I guess to a lesser degree, are only like 14% of R&B and hip hop, but on rock they're over 45%, and right. I think that's where you get kind of the insights. What I found interesting in this was that children's music is about 1.4% of all these genres. But the reason I think it's so high, and they mentioned this in the live stream, is that super successful Disney Encanto is considered children's music.
Yes, exactly. That that skews that category for sure. And this is kind of ranked by albums plus TEA plus SEA on demand. So that's kind of the way that they rank everything. And of course, number one is hip hop at 26.8%, rock 20%, pop is 12, what they consider pop 12.7%. I was kind of surprised that country is 7.7%, kind of relatively low on this list. I always thought country was a little bit higher. But it breaks it down that way. And, it's just, again, it's fascinating to kind of look at all of this and just see what's going on out there. And, I think back to our day, remember when SoundScan first came out and how enlightening that was, because that was, relatively speaking, a literal drop in the data bucket in terms of what we were looking at the time compared to the information and data we have now, with which, it's just overwhelming and a lot to take in if your job is marketing music and marketing artists. It's overwhelming how much data is out there. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and let me just clarify, for those that don't know, we mention TEA and SEA all the time because with streaming and a lesser degree downloads, they calculate sales, like album sales, this way. So, for example, TEA is track equivalent album, and that ratio is basically one album equals 10 song downloads, track downloads. So that equals a equivalent of one album. On the streaming side, it's a little bit more complicated. SEA stands for streaming equivalent album, and so, for example, the Billboard 200 includes two tiers of on-demand audio streams. Tier 1 is paid subscription audio streams because they're worth more. People are paying for them. That equates to 1,250 streams. That equals one album equivalent. Tier 2 is ad-supported audio streams, worth less because it's quote-unquote free. That equates to 3,750 streams to equal one album unit for an equivalent, and that's how they kind of track that.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. I should have thrown that in there at the same time, but and it's just, again, it's so much to kind of take in, but it's a very appropriate way, I would say. Would you change any of that? You're a much more data driven, knowledgeable person than I am, but to me, all of those things seem fair. Would you change things a little? Like we've talked about how we don't agree with the catalog designation,
right?
But anything else in there kind of make you go, I bet we could look at this a little differently.
No, not really. I like to look at that, look at the behavior, because it helps you market to those audiences, right? If you know what their behavior is. Like I've consulted for a jazz label for years. It's people don't listen to jazz music the same way they listen to pop music. They don't take one song off, put it in a playlist. yes, there are playlists for jazz, but it doesn't work the same way as it does EDM, country, and other genres. So a lot of the behavior, like almost 24% of consumption in jazz, for example, is physical.
Yeah.
Even today. And that's one of the highest. Actually, it is the highest. I think the next highest is world music at 20% physical, and then rock at almost 19% physical. So, and then you look at Latin, and it's just so crazy across the board with Latin music. Bad Bunny, as you mentioned, was like 96%, but overall, just Latin in general is, when you look at streaming video and, audio put together, is right around, 96, 97%. It's crazy.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, it's absolutely a wonderful list or it's a wonderful report to make sure you download. Check it out. It
great
is
job.
Awesome stuff. Wonderful job over there for the folks at Luminate. And oh boy, it's just amazing stuff to go and review, and I can hardly wait to get this year's next year to see where we'd have the changes have happened. So
yeah, there are 3 reports that you and I always cover, whether they're 6-month or annual reports. One of them is this Luminate one. The other one is the RIAA, and then the other one is IFPI, which is global. RIAA is U.S. only. And those are the reports that we can't wait to get our hands on and see what we can pull out of it and learn from. And this report, as you mentioned, goes really deep. So as Mike says, download this report, print it out. It's got some really great insights.
We just scratched the surface of this.
Absolutely.
So let's check out this next article. It is from Music Business Worldwide. Sir Lucian Grainge saying music needs a new streaming payout model, and we are working on it. Ooh.
Yeah, and this is from a New Year note he sent to the Universal staff. And Tim Ingham over at Music Business Worldwide, one of our absolutely favorite sources for music news, he kind of broke it down and talked about what it meant. And, Lucian Grainge said that what's become clear to us and to so many artists and songwriters, developing and established ones alike, is that the economic model for streaming needs to evolve as technology advances and platforms evolve. It's not surprising that there's also a need for music business model innovation to keep pace with the changes. Quote, there is a growing disconnect between, on one hand, the devotion of those artists whom fans value and seek to support, and on the other hand, the way subscription fees are paid by the platforms. Under the current model, the critical contributions of too many artists, as well as the engagement of too many fans, are undervalued. I thought that was really powerful stuff.
Absolutely. As Tim says, in Grainge's crosshairs there, the pro rata payout system utilized by services such as Spotify, whereby the majority of subscription and ad money generated each month, as we know, is pooled into a central pot and is then paid out to labels and artists based on their share of the volume of total plays. Also in his crosshairs, as Tim says, companies and entrepreneurs who seek to exploit this pro rata system for their own unjust gain, and in parentheses, as well as potentially streaming services who strike direct low royalty deals with music production firms and then deliberately push music fans towards this music in an attempt to save money on overall royalty costs.
Yeah, and we don't really talk about that too much. There's not a lot of reporting on that. But that is, this whole letter from Lucian Grainge, I found super interesting, and I love that an executive at his level is calling out these things. He says that in order to entice consumers to subscribe, platforms naturally exploit the music of those artists who have large and passionate fan bases, right? Makes sense.
Sure.
But then once those fans have subscribed, consumers are often guided by algorithms to generic music that lacks the meaningful artistic context. It's less expensive for the platform to license, or in some cases, has been commissioned directly by the platform.
Right.
Wow.
He goes on. For example, just witness the thousands and thousands of 31-second track uploads of sound files whose sole purpose is to game the system and divert royalties. The result, a less fulfilling experience for the consumer, diminished compensation flowing to artists that are driving the business models of the platforms, and fewer cultural moments that fans can collectively share, all of which undermines the creativity and development of artists and their music that the platforms were in part designed to foster.
This is such a great note, such a great letter to his team. And as he's said in the past, Grainge also raises concerns over the huge volume. We talk about 100,000 tracks on average being uploaded a day to DSPs, to streaming services. With such a vast and unnavigable number of tracks flooding the platforms, consumers are increasingly being guided by algorithms to lower quality functional content that in some cases can barely pass for music. He also added that in the past, music industry conflict was often focused on the majors versus the indies. Today, the real divide is between those committed to investing in artists and artist development versus those committed to gaming the system and quantity over quality. I thought that was really important. The current environment has attracted players who see an economic opportunity for flooding platforms with all sorts of irrelevant content that deprives both the artists and labels from the compensation they deserve. Wow.
Right. Yeah. And of course, if you throw something up, you got to have a solution. So Grainge says Universal Music Group is open to experimentation on that score, but appears to suggest that previously proposed alternative streaming payout models, most notably the user-centric or fan-powered model adopted by SoundCloud and others, haven't won UMG support. He said to correct the streaming payout imbalance, we need an updated model, he writes, not one that pits artists of one genre against artists of another or major label artists against indie or DIY artists. We need a model that supports all artists, DIY, indie, and major, an innovative artist-centric model that values all subscribers and rewards the music they love, a model that will be a win for artists, fans, and labels alike, and at the same time also enhances the value proposition of the platforms themselves, accelerating subscriber growth and better monetizing fandom.
I like that. I like that artist-centric that he talks about. And we'll just kind of put a fine point on this. He kind of closes out the letter by saying that, achieving such a profound change will present challenges. And right, I mean, it's obvious, but also opportunities. He said that I'm confident, however, that our long and deep involvement with music and artists will enable us to safely and profitably navigate our way forward through the industry's next big shift. And in this article, they have the full letter if you want to read that. But my big takeaway, the one that I highlighted, was this artist-centric model. And I'm excited to see it's not pro rata versus, fan powered. It's maybe something different that doesn't pit one against the other. I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah. Well, and these things are not by accident. These things are an opportunity to certainly communicate with the team and the staff and the employees of the organization, in this case, UMG. But it's also meant for other people's consumption. And so I always kind of wonder in the back of, okay, so who else is he talking to here? And is this kind of a shot over the bow in terms of future negotiations, in terms of what? So I'm sure that shoe will drop as we get further into 2023, and I'm very interested.
Read that letter in your morning coffee. I think you'll find it really interesting. That's one that I'm going to save. And as we kind of wrap up the episode here, we have one other really great piece to cover. It's from our friends over at Symphonic Distribution. Last year, I did a live stream with Randall Foster over at Symphonic about how to have the ultimate kick-ass year for 2022. Well, this is the updated version. This is from Symphonic, the ultimate guide for a kick-ass year 2023. And they go through ways to kind of maximize your back catalog and while also working on your new releases. And a few of the ways they do that, maybe one isn't sexy. Like the first one they kick off is metadata, which is super important. And if you don't know, what is metadata? It includes information like artist, genre, label, song title, album name, track number, ISRC code, and as Symphonic points out, there are really three types of metadata that you need to know about: descriptive metadata, ownership performing rights metadata, and recommendation metadata. So improper metadata causes a lot of damage in the industry. We see this all the time. I had a conference call about this yesterday about, bad metadata that puts money into the hands of people where it shouldn't be. When you have artists with a similar name, for example. So you have to correct that metadata, and they show you how to do that.
And by the way, and I will be the first to say, proper metadata is a pain in the ass, because when you're loading in tracks, it's kind of mind-numbing when you're putting all that information in.
Time-consuming, right?
And time-consuming. And it's easy to flub. It really is. And it gets very tiresome. But it is amongst the most crucial things that you have to do. So just suck it up. One of the other things, of course, is offer physical options. Contrary to popular belief, physical distribution is still an important part of artist and label development, as we were just talking about. Think about ordering physical vinyl or CDs for your old music. With a huge resurgence of vinyl making waves all over the world, fans everywhere are eager to get their hands on physical product from their favorite artists. Not everyone drives a fancy new car with a working radio, access to Spotify. CDs are still going strong all over the world, and the market for them is still a viable resource for exposure. Heck yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they talk about how to, as you're maximizing your back catalog and working on new releases, let's talk about re-releasing music and doing it the right way. They mentioned, touching the hearts of fans who miss you the most by announcing, a show where you play your past hits. Let's face it, nostalgia sells. If you can pull on the heartstrings of your audience by giving them a nostalgic anniversary tour, they'll be sure to buy tickets, merch, vinyl, CDs, and whatever else you have to offer. True fans will cherish the experience and want to remember it forever. And this reminds me of a trend a decade ago where a lot of artists were playing certain albums in their entirety. And doing a show of, I saw Elton John do Captain Fantastic at Madison Square Garden in its entirety. I saw Cheap Trick do, some of their albums like In Color and Heaven Tonight in their entirety. And those were some of the best shows I'd ever seen.
Oh, absolutely. Now, we are not saying to go and flood the market, by the way, but consider doing a compilation of your catalog if you have kind of a lot of catalog. Also, a great way of getting older stuff out there. As a disclaimer, this could create possible issues with some DSPs that have rules about re-releasing, mainly Apple, according to their style guide. However, Spotify is open to it, and some shops that do downloads are okay with it as well. And this was, you and I both worked in the catalog business for a long time.
Yeah.
And that is just something that you have to do. You have to gently, I suppose, but you always are looking to refresh the catalog and keep it in people's minds, and whether it's remastering or finding demo versions or things like that, there's always
anniversaries,
ways of doing it.
all that stuff.
Exactly. Absolutely.
But there's an art form to that. You're absolutely right. You don't want it to be, as we used to lovingly joke, never before in this order.
And that's right.
You don't want to be like that. You want to add value with it, whether it's remastered or you include a live show with it or some outtakes, B-sides, that sort of thing. So here are a few pro tips from this guide. Try remastering some of your older material, have it remixed or release, different remix versions. Recording live versions or acoustic versions, or create new masters of your existing material. This applies to many different genres and creates more content. I hate that word, but it's true, for you to promote. And I know as a music fan, I love it. We were just talking about U2 and how they're releasing these acoustic versions of 40 of their songs. I can't wait to buy that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Of course, you got to talk about new platforms whenever you're talking about this. Jay, not sure if you've heard about this. There's a new platform called TikTok that is very...
How do you pronounce that?
TikTok, I believe it's pronounced.
Okay.
TikTok, as you may know, Jay, TikTok thrives on data and metrics. If you want to improve your content's performance, understanding your profile's detailed analytics is the first step. There are some great online tools dedicated to helping you access just this, including this new company called TikTok's Analytics Future. That's on their SMS, that they being our friends over at Randall Foster and Symphonic.
Yeah. And people forget sometimes about Triller. Why should you use Triller? Well, 65 million monthly users, that may be why.
Yeah.
It's just another tool for fan engagement. That's easy for you to say. Triller's AI-powered, artificial intelligence-powered editing format makes it easy to produce professional-looking video content all in one place. Additionally, the platform makes it easy for you to share your creations across, like all these other social platforms.
How about lyric distribution? Your
Ooh, big
lyrics
one.
help foster an intimate connection with your fans. That's why having them available on platforms like Spotify, Instagram, and Facebook is so important. The more content you can provide to your audience, not surprisingly, the deeper they can connect with you and your work. Symphonic, by the way, now is a partnership with for lyrics distribution and submission. And that's really aimed at me personally, because I will constantly butcher lyrics whenever I'm singing a song. Embarrassingly so.
Yeah, and especially when I'm discovering new music.
Yes,
I'm
I'm rewriting the song completely.
Yeah, exactly. So they talk about new platforms and formats like Bandcamp. We all love Bandcamp. It's one of the largest remaining download stores out there. It's still a thing. If you have a lot of catalog, put it on, Bandcamp. It's a great way to create bundles, get download revenue directly from your consumer, Bandcamp.
Yeah, absolutely. And how about a voice strategy? Not the singing voice, although that could be a strategy as well. 71% of consumers prefer to contact... Jay, I got to get the marbles out of my mouth. 71% of consumers prefer to conduct queries by voice instead of typing. What they're using it for the most? You got it, listening to music. As a musician, it's important to be aware of this shift to come and have a voice strategy ready to go. Good news is Symphonic shows you how to do it.
Yeah, they sure do. And I'm a big fan of voice. I have one of every device that's available today.
That shall not be named.
Exactly, because they'll go off. And sometimes they do anyway. And I just love checking, hey, device, play this song by this artist, for releases that I have, just to make sure that they recognize it and they can do it. So you're absolutely right. And Symphonic's absolutely right about voice strategy. Super important. They talk about DSP management. One of the things is just claiming your profiles. Get out there. We just did this last week with an artist that was new. Claim your artist profiles and sign up for Spotify for artists, Apple Music for artists, Amazon Music for artists, all of those different things. The other thing is that clear visuals and updated artist profiles are crucial in creating and maintaining your artist image. That's according to this guide, and it's very true. In the digital age, branding is everything. So it's important to keep all your platforms up to date. Everything's got to be consistent, right? In this guide, you're going to find out how to claim your profiles, Apple, Tidal, Spotify, Deezer, Amazon, all that. So definitely check that part out.
And as painful as it might be for some of us, get familiar with the data that's available. Amazon, Spotify, Apple, Deezer, and Bandcamp. Check data on the various 4 artist platforms provided by Deezer, Amazon, Spotify, and Apple. This data will help shed some light on what you can do in the future to improve. In times like this, it's crucial to stay up to date and be aware of where you stand, so you can not only be smarter with your strategy, but thrive moving forward.
Yeah, that's right. And I would also, there's so many data platforms out there like Viberate and Chartmetric and Spot on Track and Sound Charts and all of these things. My favorite is Viberate. All transparency, I work with them. I think they're great people, but they have something the others don't have right now, and that's engagement. And they've got some other things that are coming, which is pretty exciting. So this guide it's a must-have, and it's free, and you can download it, from Symphonic, or, the link is in your morning coffee this last week. The ultimate guide for a kick-ass year 2023. The guide also addresses things like rights management and publishing and sound exchange and YouTube's content ID and sync licensing and branding and best practices and on and on and on. It comes out every year. It is a fantastic resource. I keep it on my desktop, and I cut and paste things out of it to send to clients sometimes, and sometimes I'll send them the full guide. But do yourself a favor, download this guide, and keep it handy. It's absolutely amazing.
Totally. Absolutely. So on that note, Jay, we do need to wrap up this edition of the podcast. By the way, if you enjoy our show, please tell one friend. Jay and I really appreciate it. Just one friend.
Tell one friend.
That's right.
We appreciate it.
And as I've mentioned, and then Jay will come over to your house and wash your car. I mean, it's so easy. Tell a friend, get a car wash.
Is Simonize still a thing?
It is. Okay. Or if it isn't, it's going to become a thing when you incorporate that into
Simonize. All right.
Simonize.
All right.
That's going
Wax
back.
on,
You were
wax
showing
off.
your age. That's right.
please.
Exactly. So we also want to thank the Music Business Association, Bandzoogle, Hypebot, Bands in Town for making it happen with us. Boy, we couldn't say thank you more or loud enough to them. And of course, thanks to you, the listeners. Boy, Jay and I do not take any of this for granted. We certainly appreciate everyone tuning in, and we get kind notes back, and it's just really fun to know that folks are out there listening and care about what we're talking about. So Jay and I really appreciate that. So big thanks. And on that note, have a fabulous week, everyone. We will see you next time on the Your Morning Coffee Podcast.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.